Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa,
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score!
and we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome. This is Wacky Wednesday on the Arrowhead Addict channel. I'm Adam Best, flying solo today, here with producer Richard. Sterling is off. I'm really excited about today's show. We're going to do a deep dive on a divisional rival with an expert who covers the team, and I think that's going to be real exciting. But first, some business. Caesars Sportsbook is looking to cover your first bet up to $1,000. New customers will get a second chance bet up to $1,000 when you sign up with our promo code ARROW1000. That means if your first bet loses, you will get your full wager returned as a bonus bet up to $1,000. Caesars offers daily profit boost as well as Caesars rewards credits on every wager, which can be redeemed for bonuses, sports tickets, and other VIP experiences. Signing up with our code ARROW1000 not only covers your first bet, but also gets you access to their fantastic rewards program. If you're looking to join Caesars, go download the app and register with our promo code ARROW1000 to make sure your first bet is covered. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 or older and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check the episode description for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. All right, let's welcome Lou Scataglia of Predominantly Orange to the show. Lou, what's going on over in Broncos country?
Things are going well, Adam. There is new hope. I have my Bo Nix jersey on. I mean, life could not be any better for the Denver Broncos, believe it or not.
I know how that feels. It's been a while, but that new car smell on a quarterback, there's nothing quite like it. So I figured this is the perfect time to talk to you because this is a true reboot, and I'm very interested to look under the hood with someone who really knows this roster and this team and what they're trying to do there. So let's go through the roster unit by unit, and I'm going to pick your brain a little bit. Sound good?
Sure. Go for it.
Let's start off with quarterback, of course. We're already talking Bo Nix, so let's just stay with Bo Nix here. And this is a tough question. Was Bo Nix a reach?
Well, I think if you go by a lot of the consensus draft boards, you'll see Bo Nix ended up somewhere like he's the 37th best prospect here, or he's the 50th best prospect on this website. I think what matters most is that the Denver Broncos reportedly had Bo Nix as their third-rated prospect, I believe, just behind Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. The Broncos were also pretty big on using analytics to try to figure out who they wanted to target, and they actually found that Bo Nix was ranked at the very top in like red zone and third down and sort of high percentage plays. So I know when the Broncos drafted Bo Nix, I was actually disappointed at first. And I know some Chiefs fans were probably laughing, like, I can't believe they took Bo Nix. But if you kind of break it down and you kind of look at what Bo Nix does well and what Sean Payton likes from his quarterbacks, what does Sean Payton like? He likes quarterbacks that maybe have functional mobility, can get the ball out, 1, 2, 3, get the ball out in under 2 seconds. He likes quarterbacks that can play on time and in rhythm. That's a phrase that I have typed out about 57 times this offseason, writing articles for Predominantly Orange. What does Bo Nix do well? Well, he completed over 75% of his passes at Oregon in 2023. He gets the ball out on time and in rhythm. He can make plays with his legs. I mean, he's not Lamar Jackson, but my goodness, there's only one Lamar Jackson. So I think in terms of the scheme fit, Bo Nix is not a reach at all. And I would argue that among all the rookie quarterbacks, this is probably the best overall fit. I kind of think the Broncos are kind of in a position where they can be that sort of surprise breakout team that no one really takes seriously. I've made comparisons to the 2023 Houston Texans, and I'm not saying the Broncos are going to win 10 games and win a playoff game, but I'm saying that not a lot of people are buying into the Broncos with a rookie quarterback. I tend to think that, we won 8 games last year. We got better. Maybe we can win 9, 10 games this year. So no, I don't think Bo Nix was a reach at all.
Yeah, quarterback is such an important position, the most important position by far, that I think if you have conviction on a guy, does it really matter if you get him at 21 or 12? Just go ahead and take the guy and don't risk anybody else getting him. And obviously, Sean Payton knows what he's doing here. He has a reputation as a quarterback whisperer. I mean, Russell Wilson, notwithstanding, I'm not sure that was ever a good fit. But I see what you're saying in this era of where they're taking away explosive plays, defenses we're talking about. Yep. Bo Nix is a guy who has a high completion percentage. He's a tactical scrambler. He's smart. He's the most experienced quarterback in this class. And I don't think, frankly, Sean Payton really wants to wait around for 2 or 3 years for a developmental, kind of raw rookie. Is that the right read?
Oh, for sure. Sean Payton is, I think, 61 years old. He's not going to coach forever. And I think from the second he took this job, he had a plan to sort of reset with the rookie in 2024. And there was never any indication this offseason that the Broncos were rebuilding. I think that's a huge myth. There was nothing that they did to indicate a rebuild. I would call it a retooling. I mean, if we want to, change up the words, but this was never a rebuild. I don't think Sean Payton wants to do this thing for another 3 years and then blossom in 2027. I think he's ready to get this franchise on the right track starting this upcoming season.
And it's worth reminding Chiefs fans, not that I'm comparing Bo Nix to Mahomes. I'm not going to commit blasphemy on this program, but Sean Payton was one of the people that was the highest on Patrick Mahomes in that draft and wanted to go up and get him. The Chiefs just beat him to the punch. So he has a pretty good track record here of identifying and developing quarterbacks, which leads us to Zach Wilson. What's the deal there?
I mean, I think the idea is fun. I think ideally Broncos trading for Zach Wilson, you kind of hope that Sean Payton can work with him, Davis Webb, our quarterback's coach, and they can get him to the point where he can be a fun backup option. I mean, I still think he's just 24 years old, so he's young. He was the 2nd overall pick a few years ago for a reason. So I actually did not mind the trade. It was a late round pick swap. Worst comes to worst, Wilson maybe doesn't even make the active roster and they stuff him on the practice squad. I don't mind the trade. The trade was never supposed to be, Zach Wilson's going to be the starter. It's a reclamation project that a QB needy team like the Broncos should try, right? What if Bo Nix stinks, right? And what if Zach Wilson, figures something out? You never know. Overall, I don't hate the Zach Wilson trade. I think a lot of people laughed at it at first, but I think when you think about more strategically, it was a sound trade to make.
It's no risk and it's unlikely to be a reward, but it is a high reward, no risk situation. So,
it is.
And when you're looking at uncertainty at the quarterback position, I really don't mind double dipping, triple dipping. That said, who do you expect to be the starter in week 1?
I think Sean Payton is playing the long game, and I think he knows it's going to be Bo Nix. Jarrett Stidham is maybe kind of like the de facto leader in the clubhouse because he's the lone incumbent. Stidham, I think, was slightly better than Nix overall in the first part of the offseason activities. But I think when all the teams gather back for all the training camps and the other various offseason activities, Bo Nix will begin to separate himself enough to where Sean Payton says, all right, well, maybe Bo Nix is only a quarter of a step behind Jarrett Stidham. So I'm going to make my 24-year-old rookie 12th overall pick the starter. Also, the Broncos did not draft Bo Nix 12th overall to sit him on the bench in favor of Jarrett Stidham, who is the equivalent of a piece of toast that you make in the morning for breakfast. I mean, he's the most average, boring player in NFL history. So there's no way the Broncos were going to start Jarrett Stidham. So Bo Nix will be named the starter maybe a couple days before week 1, honestly.
That would make things interesting. Let's move on to the players blocking for those quarterbacks, the offensive line. Obviously, super high on Quinn Miners. He's an awesome player, one of the better guards in the league, especially if you're talking about young guards. Yeah. But how good is the rest of this unit?
Yeah, so I think a misconception with offensive lines, is that we look at sack totals and we say, this unit allowed 45 sacks. They must be a below average unit. Well, Adam, you know as well as anybody that Russell Wilson takes a lot of sacks, period. He has 527 career sacks taken. I think that's already top 5 in NFL history. That's just who he's always been. The Broncos, if I'm not mistaken, allowed, I want to say Russell Wilson took 50 sacks last year. You look at offensive line rankings, you look at PFF grades, if you buy into those, the Broncos offensive line was a solid unit left to right last year. They had 5 respectable starters from Bowles, Ben Powers at left guard. He's average. Lloyd Cushenberry was a top 7 center last year. He left. Quinn Miners was PFF's 3rd rated guard. And Mike McGlinchey, some people called him McFlinchy because of his false starts. He really came on towards the end of the year. Even without Lloyd Cushenberry, I think the Broncos at least have a top half unit. I mean, they have 2 good tackles, Bowles and McGlinchey. You can't really say that they're not good, right? Miners is an elite guard, and then Ben Powers at left guard, I would say, is average, modestly saying he's average. So the Broncos' offensive line, it's not a glaring weakness by any means. And when you have a quarterback that fits the offense better in Bo Nix, that can get the ball out on time, guess what? That elevates the play of the offensive line because they're not having to block for 7-8 seconds while Russell Wilson does pirouettes in the backfield and takes a sack. And so, yeah, the offensive line in 2024 will be just fine.
Yeah, you almost had me laughing there with McFlinchy because we're going to raise you one there. And,
yeah, no kidding.
Hold our beer, right?
Yeah.
I think we had the most penalized player in the league in Juwan Taylor.
Yep.
So definitely know what you're talking about there. I'm in agreement with you on Russell Wilson. I think sacks are not totally a quarterback sack, but to a good degree, a quarterback sack. And he would just hold on to the ball and go big game hunting. And when you look at him and how he's kind of deteriorated as an athlete, if the moon ball is not there downfield, he's in trouble because he can't evade pass rushers like he used to. And I just don't think, especially if you look at the kind of things that Sean Payton did with Jameis Winston and some of those other quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater, he wants the ball to get out quick, right? He wants things to be, like you said, on time, on schedule. He doesn't want a lot of Patrick Mahomesian out of structure, hero ball, right? Because you have to have the guy to pull that off. And I think Russell Wilson probably is just at this stage in his career in denial about who he is. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, so my now fiance, who really never watched a lick of football in her life, watched every game with me last year, and she kind of saw really quickly, like, there is something up with Russell Wilson. The late game heroics were really cool, right? Russell Wilson has an affinity for those game-winning drives. He still has that it factor in him, but I do think he is in denial a bit as to who he is as a passer. It was either a downfield ball to Cortland Sutton or a check down to Samaje Perine. The middle of the field was not used, which is a pillar of a functioning NFL offense. So the right decision was to cut Russell Wilson. And I've been warning, because I live in Pittsburgh, I've been warning all of my Steelers fans, friends, and family, like, I'm warning you right now, it's not going to be pretty.
It's probably not going to be Russ by the end of the season. It might be Justin Fields, actually.
Yeah, you're right.
Talk about hedging your bet at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the guys that Bo Nix or whoever wins that job will be throwing to. I think this is a really interesting wide receiver group. Of course, you have Cortland Sutton, who you just mentioned, as kind of the veteran leader of that room. Very good player. You also have Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin. I was very high on Troy Franklin. Was shocked to see him slip to the 4th round in last year's draft. Can one of those guys hit in 2024?
I think the most likely one is Marvin Mims. I mean, he has the makeup to be one of those over-the-top speedster wide receivers we saw in limited action. Marvin Mims just did not get a lot of run on offense. It was odd. He was one of the best return specialists in the NFL last year. I think he was an all-pro at that. We saw he has an affinity for the big play. I'm not really sure if Marvin Mims I'm not really sure if he's really struggled with much of anything last year. I just think it was he just didn't get put on the field a whole lot. Maybe he didn't get targeted enough because our quarterback was so inefficient. Mims is probably the most likely. Ever since Cortland Sutton tore his ACL in 2020, he's kind of been relegated to that 775-yard, wide receiver number 2 type of player. I will say, if nothing else, the Broncos wide receiver room is pretty deep. I mean, you have Sutton, you have Mims, you have Troy Franklin, who was a 2nd-round talent. You also have Tim Patrick returning from injury. I know Chiefs fans know about Tim Patrick because they see him twice a year. And then you have a do-it-all guy in Josh Reynolds coming over from the Detroit Lions. So if nothing else, the room is deep. If Mims can separate himself and be a number one wide receiver, this wide receiver unit is going to be a top 10 unit in the NFL. I'm really encouraged by the fact that the Broncos actually have two young guys in this unit now, but I would bet a good bit that Marvin Mims can have a really good year too, and maybe show signs of being that wide receiver one that Denver's needed for a while.
Yeah, I really liked what I saw out of Marvin Mims last year. His yards per out run for a while there were one of the best rates in the whole league. He was one of the more efficient receivers in the league. And I was just kind of, as a fantasy guy, scratching my head. Why can't he get on the field? Why is little Jordan Humphrey or whoever out there ahead of Marvin Mims? Is this just veteran deference or what's going on?
Yeah.
But I think he's an exciting player. I like Troy Franklin too. His BMI, I think he might need to add some muscle to deal with press and be a full-time player. But you'd hope that he'd show some signs by the end of his rookie year.
Definitely.
And people forget about Tim Patrick and Josh Reynolds, but Josh Reynolds was an important player for the Detroit Lions last year. And Tim Patrick has been sneaky good his entire career. I'm going to be really interested to see post Jerry Jeudy who kind of emerges out of that fivesome there.
Sure. Yeah. It's a very intriguing top five. I'm encouraged by the unit, but only time will tell. We'll see what happens.
Another battle is for the tight end position. You have Adam Troutman, who's the veteran there. You have Lucas Kroll, who's it seems like some heat is gathering around. And then you have Greg Dulcich, who kind of was thought of as this potential star tight end, but he's been kind of injury plagued. It's fair to say. Who do you think is going to win that battle?
Can I pick the giant meteor? Because I don't know. Man, I don't know what to think about this unit. Gerald Everett was on the LA Chargers for a little bit. He was a free agent earlier this offseason. I was like, why not throw a few million bucks at Gerald Everett? He's a reliable, modestly producing tight end that could at least raise the floor of this unit. And the Broncos didn't do anything. So that leads me to believe that maybe Sean Payton thinks that Lucas Kroll can develop or Greg Dulcich can stay healthy. I did do the math. Greg Dulcich's rookie season, he played in 10 games, and he would have been on pace for, I think, about 55 receptions and 700 yards had he played the whole season. He produced well his rookie season, but, I mean, he's played in 12 games in 2 years. Can't get his hamstrings healthy. Best ability is availability, so I'm not sure what to think of him. Adam Troutman is just a guy. He's kind of the tight end version of Jarrett Stidham. He's just kind of there. He knows the system. He can catch a pass or two a game. He can block. But other than that, this tight end unit is just, it kind of disappoints me. I wish Sean Payton and George Payton would have made at least one free agency move, like even a Logan Thomas or something like that. My bet is that Troutman is listed as the TE1, but I would not be surprised to see Lucas Kroll actually get some reps over Greg Dulcich when the 2024 season begins. At the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised to see Lucas Kroll maybe is that sneaky tight end one, and then maybe he can build that momentum going into 2025. But the tight end unit is probably the worst in the NFL, so I wouldn't expect much from it this coming year anyway. Yeah,
well, that's what happens when you trade around. You trade a former first-round pick, Yeah. But I like the way Greg Dulcich looks when he's out there. He's smooth. Sure. He's athletic. He's got size. I guess the guy just can't stay healthy, and those hamstring issues are notoriously tricky. So it sounds like Lucas Kroll about mid-season last year, Sean Payton made it a priority to get the ball in his hands and integrate him into the office.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like there's something there with Kroll. He's a big body target. He's good in the red zone. So I think Sean Payton is kind of hoping that Kroll, which was one of his guys from his Saints days, can end up, being something for us. But we'll see.
Now, I hate to talk running backs with a Denver Broncos fan because that's going to remind me of Terrell Davis and Clint Portis and all this PTSD.
Yeah.
But what are you thinking about that running back group? How does that platoon shake out?
So I read there was something talking with my predominantly orange buddies. One of Mike Kliss, a Broncos insider, had kind of indirectly alluded to the fact that Javonte Williams could actually kind of be on the roster bubble. So Jaleel McLaughlin was the shifty sort of third down, do it all back. That was really Pirine, but McLaughlin was that shifty scat back last year for us. Samaje Pirine was just excellent out of the backfield. We got Audric Estime in the NFL draft from Notre Dame. He's a nice bruiser. And then we also have obviously Javonte Williams, who averaged less than 4 yards per carry. I never liked the Javonte Williams pick, so maybe I'm speaking with a little bit of bias. I've just never really been a huge fan of his. I would not be surprised to see the Broncos actually maybe keeping Pirine over him, simply because Pirine is really more of an established veteran, and he's a better receiver out of the backfield than Javonte. So if we started the year with like Jaleel McLaughlin as RB1, Pirine as the 2, and then Audric Estime and maybe some short yardage red zone situations, that would not surprise me. Maybe seeing if they can flip Javonte for, a 5th or 6th to a team that maybe needs a boost at running back. But it'll be one of Pirine or Javonte that probably is not on the roster come week 1. They're not going to keep 4 active running backs, and McLaughlin has been the best one this offseason. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's Javonte Williams. So maybe that could be a surprise to some Chiefs fans that Javonte Williams could actually be the cut here. But that's sort of my take here on the running back room.
Wow. Yeah, it makes sense. I think Javonte Williams is exciting when you watch the highlights because he breaks tackles and he's kind of this angry runner. But his vision maybe is a little bit lacking.
Sure.
I've never felt like he had great vision out there. And sometimes, as we saw with Priest Holmes, who wasn't an amazing athlete, vision means a lot at that position.
Yep.
I'm kind of envisioning maybe Estime being the Mark Ingram and McLaughlin being a poor man's Alvin Kamara.
I think that's the idea.
Yeah, he likes running. They utilize the running back so much. I think there's room for 2 guys to get a lot of burn.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that's what Sean Payton is hoping for. They're the 2 youngest guys. They have the 2 highest ceilings. So I think ideally, maybe by the end of the year, we're looking at mainly 2 running backs getting a bulk of the carries with Estime and McLaughlin, and maybe even Pirine could even be like a trade deadline piece for us. But I think you hit the nail on the head there with the sort of his Broncos version of Ingram and Kamara.
Well, Javonte was drafted by the previous coaching staff, by the previous regime, right?
Yeah, George Payton's still there. He drafted Javonte. He also traded up to do it in the 2nd round, which makes me sick to my stomach. But yes, that was Vic Fangio and his staff that maybe had a say in Javonte Williams arriving in Denver. So I'm not just super high on him. I actually think there might be an outside shot that he makes the roster. I think he's firmly on the bubble.
Hey, Chiefs fans can sympathize with picking a running back in the early rounds that doesn't play much. I'm not even going to mention the name, but it certainly burns when that happens. Let's switch up to defense, starting with the defensive line. Is there a true game wrecker on this unit?
The short answer is no. The long answer is also no, with more words. Zach Allen played really well last year, actually. He led the team in quarterback hits. I mean, he's a defensive end, so he's playing from the interior, had 24 quarterback hits. He's also played every single year of his career in Vance Joseph's defenses. So I kind of think Zach Allen could hit his stride this year. I also do think we underrate some of the changes that Denver made along the defensive line. We traded for John Franklin Myers, who is a plus defender. He's a good pass rush threat from the DE spot as well. We committed highway robbery from the New York Jets. I think it was like a 6th-round pick. We got Malcolm Roach as well in free agency, who is a really good run stuffer, among one of the best in the league last year. And then we signed a veteran journeyman in Angelo Blackson. He had a previous stop in the AFC West with the Raiders a few years back. Blackson is a solid backup. And then we still have DJ Jones in the picture. I don't think there's an alpha dog along the defensive line. I do think, and I've said this a few times in various articles, that Zach Allen could potentially flirt with double-digit sacks and 30 quarterback hits, just simply because the rest of the defensive front has been improved. So I think that would make life a lot easier for Zach Allen. Edge rushers, I mean, I mentioned last year that Cooper and Benito could be some breakout candidates. They both had 8.5 sacks. We can talk more about the edge rushers if you want. I still think the Broncos edge group needs a little bit more juice, but overall, I can't really pin that sort of alpha dog on anyone but Zach Allen heading into 2024.
Yeah, and Mr. Orange brings up that Nick Bonito has some upside. I think, I don't know that his frame allows him to be a guy like Max Crosby, who
Right.
plays a billion snaps, but very good speed rusher, right? With some upside to be more.
Yeah. Nick Bonito is I think still in that pass rush specialist type of role. He did blossom really well in year 2. I think Bonito probably has the highest ceiling. I would still kind of tend to bet on Zach Allen more. But I mean, the Broncos just need one of those young pass rushers to take that next step, whether it's Bonito or Jonathan Cooper or Baron Browning or Jonah Ellis, our 3rd round pick, just somebody. I mean, it seems like it's a deep unit on paper, but we have been missing that alpha dog ever since the days of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. You guys obviously have one in Chris Jones. We'll see. I think the unit is much improved for this year than it was at any point last year. So I do think we're not going to get gouged in the run game, and I think our pass rush could be a little bit better. But that alpha dog is still way up in the air for me.
Yeah, and Lou, you know this as well as I do because Von Miller, right? When you have a Von Miller or a Chris Jones, the other guys all look better. They get cleanup sacks.
Yep.
They're not going to be the focus of the blocking scheme.
Yep.
So that's important. But I do like Zach Allen. I think he's kind of a poor man's Trey Hendrickson, and I don't mean that as an insult.
Yeah.
I think he was a good signing, a good player, especially at the price point. What did they get him for? It was last year, right?
About $15 million a year, which a lot of people at first were like, that's a huge overpay. And turns out at the end of the year, that contract looks pretty darn good. So here we are.
Yeah, it's in the same ballpark as Charles Omenihu, and so I think it's a pretty good signing. Let's look at the linebackers now, and I'm really eager to hear your response here because the Broncos allowed 5 yards per carry to running backs in 2023. That was the worst mark in the league.
Don't remind me.
Can this group fix that?
I sure hope so, man. I mean, as well as I do, games in the NFL are won in the trenches no matter what. No matter how offensive the NFL gets, games are still won with the hands in the dirt, with the big nasties up front. We obviously lost Josie Jewell to the Carolina Panthers. We signed Cody Barton, who actually might not be much of a downgrade at all from Josie Jewell. Alex Singleton comes back. He's a tackling machine. We also have Jonas Griffith, who was, I believe he missed all of last year. I think he had a torn ACL, if I'm not mistaken. He actually showed some flashes here and there. The inside linebacking unit, I would say, is pretty average at best. I did kind of speak about our edge rushers. I do think the biggest thing here is that I don't think we're going to allow 5 yards per carry in 2024, and I think the additions along the defensive front, the defensive line with JFM and Malcolm Roach and Angelo Blackson, I think that will be, what's that saying, the tide that raises all boats. I think that'll make life a little bit easier for Singleton and Cody Barton, and it might take some pressure off of Bonito and Cooper and Browning. The Broncos defense, Adam, was just historically bad last year. I mean, it was historically bad, like top 3 worst ever. Something clicked. I don't know if they had a long talk in the mirror with themselves. Something clicked, which is great. Obviously, the Chiefs offense, a big taste of that. The Broncos obviously brought in some more talent along the defense at all 3 levels. So I think the unit overall will be better. I'm kind of envisioning this unit right around average. I would say that's a pretty reasonable sort of guesstimate for where this unit finishes. But I don't think there's a glaring weakness along that defensive front 7 anymore. I really don't. I think units could be better, but I don't think there's any glaring obvious weakness.
Sure, and this is just me from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
Do you think Van Joseph came in and was, deferred too much to maybe Sean Payton and just really wasn't himself? And after that, I don't know if it was that Dolphins game. Shoot, I have to ask you about that Dolphins game. I mean, how much is that 5 yards per carry inflated by Mostert and Achane,
Yeah.
But I wonder if he kind of got in there and said, no, I'm going to, I need to do this differently, or I need to be true to myself, or I need to work with the personnel we have. Was there some decision by him that made all the difference?
Not to my knowledge. I'm sure someone might have a report that there was maybe some closed doors meeting where the defense got together and they, realized that they're better than what the numbers that they were giving up indicate. Vance Joseph has always been at least like a solid coordinator. He's been a head coach with the Broncos, obviously, for a couple years. He was a coordinator before that with the Miami Dolphins. He coordinated the Cardinals defense for 4 years in the Cliff Kingsbury era. So he's been around the block and he knows how to coordinate a defense. Adam, honestly, the biggest thing was that the personnel was just so bad. Like, it was bad. It was a personnel issue, I think, first and foremost. And I'm not sure really what happened to where the defense did a complete 180. I mean, it was miraculous. So I think now that Vance has some better personnel, I think he's going to feel a lot more at ease with this unit, knowing that they're probably not going to get off on the bad foot. And I might add, had the defense not started historically bad, the Broncos probably don't start 1-5. Maybe they start 3-3. The Broncos finished last year 7-4. We could have been looking at a 9-10 win team, all of a sudden. So who's to say the Broncos can't win 9-10 games if the defense doesn't start historically bad again? I think the unit will be fine. It's not going to be a special top 10 unit by any means, but I think it'll be fine. It'll be around average, 16 to 20-ish type of scoring defense, I think.
Yeah, it was just a little strange to me that Vance came back. You don't see that happen a lot.
No, not
right?
really.
But
not at all.
But I guess if you get a good job, you swallow your pride, and he obviously likes being in Denver. So while you talked about the defense having kind of a lack of talent, one place where they didn't have a lack of talent is at cornerback, because I think Patrick Surtain is one of the best corners in the league, not just one of the best young corners, one of the best corners in the league.
For sure.
So we can talk about him, but what I'm really interested in is second-year player Riley Moss. Are you seeing him emerge in these early camps and off-season activities?
I think Moss was doing a lot of side work, actually. I don't really think anyone in the secondary really emerged, if you will, in some of these offseason activities. I think the battle for that second quarterback spot opposite Surtain is very much up in the air. It could go to Moss. I think Moss has a good shot. It could go to Levi Wallace, the veteran that we signed. He played on the Buffalo Bills, so Chiefs fans probably know who Levi Wallace is. We have Damari Mathis, who was burnt toast last year, unfortunately. And then we have Jaquan McMillan, who was our surprise stud slot cornerback last year. So you're going to have McMillan entrenched in the slot. I wouldn't be surprised to see Levi Wallace starting the year as the CB2, believe it or not. I do think Moss has the best chance of the other young cornerbacks that we have on the roster of eventually being that CB2. I think Mathis he had a good rookie year, and then year two, he kind of just fell off a cliff. So I'm not personally high on Mathis being able to earn the CB2 duties again. But I mean, you have two very good cornerbacks in Surtain and McMillan. You have a solid veteran in Wallace, and you have at least one young guy with potential in Riley Moss. And then I can't forget Chris Abrams drained in the 5th round of this year's draft. I actually almost forgot about him. He's also someone who I'm sure is going to have something to say about those CB2 duties. So you have multiple young guys who have potential, which is awesome. You also have multiple young guys who are two of the best at their respective positions in the NFL. And then you have a battle-tested veteran in Levi Wallace. So I think the cornerbacks specifically are going to be fine in 2024. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of a carousel at the CB2, believe it or not.
Yeah, the Chiefs are kind of in a similar situation after losing L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah.
The thing with Mathis and really all cornerbacks is that position is the most inconsistent position in the National Football League. It's a bit of a roller coaster. So it's never too big of a surprise when someone has an off year or completely bounces back or has a great year out of nowhere. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because you have Surtain, you have McMillan, who I really like. And
awesome.
Guys in the slot, I think, are a little bit more consistent, those slot corners than some of the outside starters. I think it's a little bit, I don't want to say an easier role, but less complex maybe.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a pretty accurate statement. I mean, K'Wan Williams, news broke that he wasn't going to start the season. And it's like, McMillan, you're up. And it's like, he didn't skip a beat. It's like he was a 5-year veteran. McMillan really helps out the secondary going forward. He's a position now that is solidified, hopefully for the long term. So he was a nice surprise last year.
Let's hit on the other part of the secondary, and that's safety. I'm really interested to hear your take on what does life after Justin Simmons look like?
Yeah, I mean, Justin Simmons played, I think, 118 games with the Broncos. He was the longest tenured Bronco. until he got cut. I do think that the release was a bit surprising. I was thinking maybe there's a restructure, a modest extension, maybe a trade. I think Justin Simmons does deserve to sign with a contender. I mean, you Chiefs fans know just how I think he picked off Mahomes. I don't know how many times, maybe the most interceptions by any defensive back off of Patrick Mahomes. So we all know how good Simmons is. I don't need to talk about that. We effectively signed Brandon Jones from the Dolphins to replace him. We also brought back PJ Locke III, and then we also have Caden Stearns returning from injury as well. We also have a second-year player in J.L. Skinner. He's out of Boise State out of last year's draft. So I kind of think even like I mentioned with the inside linebackers, I think like the safeties, like to me, it's a pretty average unit. I don't think this unit is going to take as big of a drop off as some people think. I think with Brandon Jones and PJ Locke, you have two guys that can actually line up closer to the line of scrimmage and sort of that hybrid linebacker safety role. And that's something that is huge in Vance Joseph's defenses. So Brandon Jones being able to do that, he's also younger, going to be a little bit more explosive than Simmons. And then you still have PJ Locke, who is still pretty young. I think those two are really going to have a great year. And then Caden Stearns, I mean, he's something else when he's on the field, but my goodness, he can't stay healthy. I hope to goodness that he can put a full season together because he is just an awesome talent. And then I'm really curious to see how our second-year safety J.L. Skinner does. He didn't really get any action in his rookie year, but he's 6'4", 220, kind of the size of Kyle Hamilton of the Ravens. He's just a huge specimen on the back end. But overall, Adam, I think the safety unit's going to be fine. Again, I think it's going to be like an average-ish unit. If that makes sense, I wouldn't be surprised to see PJ Locke and Brandon Jones, though, both having some pretty good years nonetheless.
Yeah, Lou, I'm not surprised that you were a bit shocked by Justin Simmons' release because I think everyone was. And I'm kind of shocked that he hasn't been picked up yet.
Yeah, it's a little odd.
I'm kind of guessing that he's just waiting to see how the preseason shakes out and sees if there's an injury, to a safety on one of these contending teams, and he can go ring hunting. Mm-hmm. But he's still such a good player.
He's an outstanding player.
He's as good as you get from the neck up, but he's not a bad athlete either.
Nope.
And I can't imagine that. I don't know. He'd start for what? 27 teams, 28 teams?
I would argue he would start for 31 other teams. I'm obviously kind of hoping that he doesn't sign with a team like the Chiefs. Simmons has earned every right to sign with a contender. I hope it's a team like the Lions or the 49ers or like a fun NFC team. There were some rumblings that maybe the Broncos can bring him back because he's still a free agent. I think that ship has sailed. We obviously wish Justin Simmons all the best because he's a great human being and he's an outstanding football player. I do think Chiefs fans and Patrick Mahomes specifically are glad that Simmons isn't going to be on the back end anymore. But I mean, it's time for a new era on the back end, and I'm definitely a little bit more encouraged for this defense heading into 2024 for sure.
Yeah, it might be a good situation for everybody. Get some money off the books, turn the page. He gets to go play for a contender. I do not think it will be in Kansas City because they are very deep at safety. Before the draft, I thought maybe, and then they picked another safety fairly early. So I don't think you're going to have to worry about him being in red and yellow. Good news for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's finish up here with head coach Sean Payton. Mm-hmm. What I really want to know from you is what's a reasonable timetable for a complete turnaround here?
Yeah, so when I have this theory, and I don't think this is some crazy tinfoil hat thing. I think when Sean Payton took the job, they told him, look, you're going to need to make it work with Russell Wilson for at least 1 year. If it doesn't work, you have our blessing and authority to cut him. So I think Sean Payton, knowing that, had a vision where, all right, I'm probably going to move on from Russ after this year because I know it's not going to be a long-term thing. Hopefully I can reset with the rookie in 2024, and then hopefully the window opens wide in 2025. So I look at the 2023 Houston Texans, and I know maybe I'm being too much of an optimist, but I just think, okay, the Broncos have a formula in place to be a breakout team. They won 8 games last year, several against playoff teams, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Browns. I look at us having that formula, and I look at us having a quarterback that has a better fit. And I think Sean Payton is really looking at this 2024 season as being a year that the Broncos can at least finish with a winning record. And I think he has great big googly eyes for 2025 as like a year where we can have upwards of 60, 70 million in cap. We have a young, encouraging quarterback in Bo Nix that we can build around. And we have the sort of green light to sort of go all in and try to create our own Super Bowl window. I do think from the beginning, Sean Payton has kind of been eyeing that year 2 rookie quarterback type deal. So that would be 2025 as being where this sort of rebuild can hit its peak. So I think that's the ideal scenario, is that the Broncos can be a dangerous team, like a seriously dangerous competitive team, as early as 2025. And then anything after that is anyone's guess. But I think this can be a nice sort of pedestal year where we take a step forward. We show some progress with a rookie quarterback. We don't win 4 games. We win 7, 8, 9 games. Maybe we surprise some people, and then we put the foot on the gas next offseason. We go all in free agency. Sean Payton has a Hall of Fame resume as it is. He's won over 60% of his games. I don't think he ever had any intentions of rebuilding and further tarnishing his own record, if that makes sense. So I think he was wanting to get this done quickly. So that's kind of why I think that 2025 year can sort of be the peak of this de facto rebuild or retooling or whatever you want to call it.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think that George Payton they've been a little bit hamstrung because of all the picks that were traded away, right? Not only all the picks, but the cap situation. They're eating that huge dead cap hit from Russell Wilson. So I think if they can get out from under those moves, they also traded draft capital for Sean Payton, right?
Yep.
So 2025, I get what you're saying. And I think you're saying this year they're going to be frisky. They're going to be improved on defense.
Yep.
They might be a little bit of a spoiler team. And if Bo Nix comes in and surprises some people, then a Super Bowl window might open up, especially with the Raiders not really figuring themselves out.
What are they doing? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, at least you guys aren't the Raiders. At least you guys have. It appears a strategy. What are they? Do they even know?
I don't think they know. I don't even want to begin talking about the Raiders, man. But yeah,
it doesn't make you feel better though. I mean, it does
make me feel a little better that Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell are not going to be one of my 2 starting quarterbacks on my favorite team. Yeah, man.
They have no direction.
We could carve out a whole nother 45 minutes just on the Raiders.
Yeah, I think what Denver doing on paper makes sense. They're moving on from these veterans. They're aware. They're self-aware. They know they're not bringing in Devontae Adams and Chandler Jones and masquerading as a Super Bowl contender when they're not. They know where they're at as a franchise. And I think they're doing themselves a favor by not fooling themselves and doing some short-term stuff to pretend they're better than they are. But I think this new ownership group, by giving Sean Payton a long leash, there's no desperation to kind of inflate 1 year's record at the cost of tomorrow. So I think that's the right way to do things. And I think my final point here with Sean Payton is he's kind of in the situation Andy Reid was in when he came to Kansas City. Okay, we've seen you do it in Philadelphia. We've seen you do it with Donovan McNabb. Can you do it again? Can you be a quarterback whisperer in a different city with a different team? And it's going to be really interesting to watch him take young Bo Nix not that young for a rookie, right?
24
under his wing. But I think that's part of what he likes in him. But yeah, take him under his wing and see how quick he can make this happen.
Most definitely.
Lou, we definitely appreciate the time. It's not always friendly when you step behind enemy lines. So we definitely appreciate your expertise, and it's always fun talking to you.
Yep. Thank you for having me on again, Adam. It was fun.
Definitely, man. Well, that's all we've got for you guys. I want to say props to the chat and all of our members. We appreciate you guys as always. Subscribe to the AA podcast anywhere you can find podcasts, and also here on our YouTube channel. That way you never miss a show. Join us next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central here on the Arrowhead Addict channel. Sterling will be back with us. Until then, go Chiefs.